What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is actually my first video back since all of the oxygen / breakdance drama went down. And this is not going to be a traditional training video. We're not going to be doing any screen sharing. This is just going to be a conversation between you and me off the cuff about a very, very important topic and something that I've wanted to touch on for a while now. But all of the drama and the oxygen / breakdance thing going on makes this an even more relevant and more important conversation to have right now. And that conversation is this. When it comes to page builders, what is the true role of a legitimate page builder? How do the different page builders stack up against one another? Is there such a thing as a legitimate page builder and an illegitimate page builder? And what are the mandatory features? I've actually got a list of 20 mandatory features so that you can grade page builders. We're also going to do a little bit of talk between the amateur camp and the professional camp, because there are two different camps in this space, like there are in many different industries. And I think it's very important for us to distinguish, people in one camp versus people in another camp and what the two camps need from a page builder. So let's get in first to page builders and what a page builder should actually help us do. A page builder should help speed up our workflow and make our workflow easier. And if we don't know certain things, page builders can help fill in those gaps. But here's what a page builder should not do. The page builder should not lead us to making bad decisions. It should not lead us to doing things that are against best practices. And I think that's another area that we have to get into with what is the goal for the websites that we are building. Are we trying to build websites that are easy to maintain? Are we trying to build websites that help our clients achieve their objectives? Are we trying to build websites that are dynamic? It's easy to manage the content on these websites. It's easy to manage the style and design from a global standpoint. We're not getting stuck in a situation where it's very hard to change parts of the design because, for example, we have to copy and paste styles. We're not using classes. I don't want to get into all the details. We'll get there in a minute when I talk about the mandatory features. But the end result should be a website that is easy to maintain, that's scalable, that's dynamic, and that you have global control over, especially if you're a professional. Here's the thing about professional versus amateur. You can be an amateur, which means to me, an amateur is you're building a personal site for yourself, or you do it as a hobby. You do it on the side. But when I say on the side, it's like you're donating your time, maybe, if you're doing it for other people. If there is an exchange of money, you are entering the professional realm. And it is my opinion at that point that you should act like a professional. And what it means to act like a professional is you work to hone your craft. You look out for the best interests of your client. You try to build the best website that you can possibly build. And that goes back to it's scalable, it's dynamic, it's built on a great platform that's not going to go away in 2 to 3 years. Those are the things that I'm looking for, and that's the distinction that I want to make. And I think when people are hiring people and they're paying them money, there's an underlying, they obviously clients should be doing due diligence. But there's an underlying assumption that you know what you're doing. And this is where we get into the page builder realm. And for this discussion, I am going to use photography as an example. I was a photographer. I still am a photographer. And I am a true student of photography. So look at photography versus web design in the sense of page builders versus cameras and Photoshop. Photographers, professional photographers, they look at a camera as a tool, a means to an end. It's a tool that helps them create the art that they're wanting to create. The picture that they have in their mind of they're posing somebody, They are setting up technical lighting manipulation. That could be off-camera flash. That could be studio photography. They are using other light modifiers like reflectors or blackboards for negative lighting. There's a lot of different options that they can go into. They understand their camera. That means ISO, aperture, shutter speed. They fully understand the file format that they're shooting in. JPEG versus RAW, for example. So very technical when it comes to cameras, just as page builders are very technical to web designers and developers. The other side of cameras is they're extremely advanced. And you can have people who are like, no, I choose a camera because it gives me the things that I need to do to make the photo I want to make. It gives me the ultimate control. And I can put that camera in manual mode. I'm going to set the shutter speed. I'm going to choose the aperture. I'm going to choose the ISO. I'm going to shoot in RAW. I'm going to set up my lighting the way that I want to do it. I am going to use these tools to craft my art. That is a distinct philosophy that is tied to professionals. And if you're hiring a photographer, almost certainly you would want to hire a photographer that acts and behaves and makes those decisions and uses the tools that enable them to better make those decisions and better make the photos that they're trying to make. Would you agree? I think we could all agree on that, right? Then there's the other camp, the amateur camp, or the pseudo amateur camp, where it's the photographers who buy an expensive DSLR and their goal is to have the camera do almost everything for them. And whatever the camera can't do, Photoshop and filters will do it for them. Presets, as they're called. And those might be in Lightroom instead of Photoshop, but that's neither here nor there. So they buy a camera, they sell their photography, but really they're an amateur. Philosophically, they're an amateur. And I think that's another important distinction. There's a philosophical professional versus a philosophical amateur. That's really the most important thing here. So philosophically, they're an amateur. And again, they are looking to the tool to do everything for them. So they take photos on auto mode or even a pseudo auto mode like aperture priority or shutter priority or something like that. And they then take those photos into Lightroom or Photoshop and they assign presets to these photos that take care of the color, the contrast, and all of this is done for them. They haven't even made the presets themselves in a lot of cases. They've purchased preset packs online. And so somebody else did the art of the preset, and the camera did the art of the photo, and the amateur / pseudo amateur simply framed it up, which, by the way, takes some skill to frame a photo, but you're taking lots and lots and lots of elements of this artwork out of the process. All the photographer's doing is clicking the button and maybe doing some posing, which posing is, by all means, that's important, okay? But still, it's like you're doing 20% of the work. The tools are doing 80% of the job for you. That brings us to my channel. So my channel is for professionals. That is true professionals who are actively selling their craft, or philosophical professionals. These are amateurs that are deeply interested in the art side of this, the technical side of this. There's a difference between somebody who wants the tools to do everything for them and somebody who wants the tools to help them, but they also want to learn and understand. They're interested in honing their craft. That is a philosophical professional. So we all obviously start in the amateur camp. You have to start in the amateur camp because you have to start somewhere, and somewhere is usually nowhere. You don't know anything. You're completely green. If you're an amateur that seeks to move to being a professional, whether that's a true professional or a philosophical professional, my channel is for you. I'm going to help you bridge the gap. The reason I'm hitting on this discussion so much is because there is going to be, when I go through this list of 20 mandatory things that a page builder should have, there's going to be a lot of disagreement. There's going to be a lot of pushback. There's going to be a lot of people saying, no, it needs to be this way or that way. And what I think you're going to find, and this is where a lot of the toxicity and the argumentation and the confusion comes from in these discussions, where we have all of these different builders, and you've got people in the Elementor camps, you've got people in the Divi camps, you've got people in the Breakdance camp now, in the Oxygen camp, in the Bricks camp, and they're all saying, this builder that I happen to use is the absolute best builder. And we have these similar conversations in photography where it's Canon versus Nikon. But you know what happens is the professionals in photography will often acknowledge, you know what, using Canon versus Nikon at this point in the game is a completely personal choice. And the same is true for builders in some regards, but not others. There's obviously amateur cameras and there's professional cameras. Guess what? There's amateur builders and there's professional builders. And so I believe if you are a professional, whether you are a true professional charging money or a philosophical professional, you should absolutely 100% be using a professional builder or a builder that has professional tools. Okay? And you should not. I would believe it is objectively wrong for you to be using an amateur builder. Now, what are the differences? How do we know what the differences are? If a builder does not have, this is 20 mandatory things that we're about to go through. If a builder does not have one or more of these features, it is suspect. If it doesn't have a good chunk of these features, it's an amateur builder, and it is a no-go in my book. It's not used. It is not legitimate in my book. Here's why this is such a big deal. And in my opinion, not even an argument. It's not arguable because the absence of some of these features creates the situation I talked about in the beginning. The absence of these things forces you to do things improperly. It forces you to not have a dynamic website. It forces you to not have a scalable website, a website that's easy to maintain and to iterate on. It forces you into that paradigm, and that is the wrong paradigm for almost anybody who wants to build a website, but certainly for people who consider themselves to be either a true professional or a philosophical professional. So what are these 20 mandatory features? I'm just going to roll through them as fast as I possibly can. Number one is a div. It has to have a blank, unstyled container. And it is amazing to me. And why is this? Okay, a div is like the most fundamental part of HTML. Everything in web design is based on the box model. Okay, we're putting things in boxes. And then we're styling those boxes, we're moving those boxes are positioned relative to other boxes. Everything is based on boxes. Divs are simply boxes. Those boxes are divs. So you have a builder like Divi, for example. There was another one I was trying out, the Beaver Builder. I was looking at Beaver Builder the other day. So we have Divi, Beaver Builder. They don't have a div element. So they don't have the most basic fundamental aspect of HTML and web design and web development. They just don't have it. It's not an option. You can't simply add a blank container to a page and then add things to it and style it the way that you want to style it. This is a fundamental gap that's you can't cross. It's once you don't have a div available to you, this is not a legitimate builder. Because what happens is, and, Lewis, for example, SoFly, Breakdance, makes the case of we need to make the builders like Breakdance more approachable to amateurs. And the problem with that is in doing so, you lead the amateur into a bad scenario, a bad paradigm where they're building websites that are not scalable, not dynamic, hard to maintain, and not truly customizable. But then when that amateur who has aspirations of becoming a professional is finally introduced to the div, they have to learn everything all over again. They feel completely lost because they don't know what to do with this blank container. And that's a huge problem. I will also say this, you are not an asset to your client if you're building websites and you don't know what a div is or what it's for or how to use it. and you're using a tool that doesn't give you the div in the first place. You are a liability to your client. This is not even a pro feature. This is just the fundamentals, right? Number 2, classes, pseudo classes, and pseudo elements. Extremely important. This is another thing that so many builders either don't have or put on the back burner. And this is another, again, mandatory feature. Divi does not allow you to put classes on elements. They have their own proprietary way of trying to maintain global control over components. Divi does use classes. It just doesn't give you access to the classes. You can't make your own custom classes, all that stuff. Elementor, I believe, lets you add classes, but they're kind of hidden away. There's also the question of, can you add a class and then style the class with the builder, or can you only add classes that you have pre-styled somewhere else by writing custom CSS? The builder should allow you to style the custom classes that you are adding. It is my opinion, but again, I don't think this is even arguable, that a professional builder should be a class first, div first builder. That should be the most important things. Does it give me a div, and does it give me the ability to add classes? Those are the two most important things. Classes obviously give you that global control over your styling. You can watch any of my tutorial videos using classes. You can watch my tutorial on BIM. Classes are like divs in the sense that they are fundamental to CSS. The first thing that you will learn in CSS is what is the difference between an ID and a div. Just like in HTML, you're going to learn what a div is very, very early on in the process. Classes, very, very early on in the process of learning CSS. To say that a builder is more friendly to amateurs by not having classes and not having divs is basically saying that they just shouldn't learn at all. That they should just be able to throw websites together, have no idea what they're doing, and apparently come to an end result. But we all know what that end result is. It's a website that's not scalable, not dynamic, and it's hard to maintain. It fails the 3 things that any client is going to want from their website. Beyond, does the website convert, right? Does the website get me leads and sales? That's primarily what they care about. But it's a huge, huge, huge problem if they can't change it easily, can't maintain it easily, can't iterate on it easily. Because websites in this day and age, that is a must-have. So div and classes, which also includes pseudo classes and pseudo elements. For example, can you change the hover style? Pseudo elements, can you add a before? Can you add an after? Can you target first child, last child? Can you do that kind of stuff in the builder? And with so many builders, Elementor, Divi, Beaver Builder, you cannot do these things. Those are amateur tools for amateurs. And if you are a professional in any sense of the word, or you're an amateur that hopes to one day move towards being a professional, then you should not be using those amateur builders, period. Number 3 is a section element. A section element is a fancy div. It's a div that actually has a semantic HTML section tag, but it also has an inner div inside of it. It is my opinion that the builder should give you access to that inner div as well. Oxygen does not. That is a big downside of Oxygen sections. Bricks does give you access to the inner div of a section. That inner div is your website width. It is auto-margined to be aligned to the center so that you just add a section element and you can immediately start adding content into that section, and everything will be in perfect alignment. Everything will look good on mobile devices as far as a side gutter goes. A section element is very, very, very important. And it follows the div first philosophy of web design. Like I mentioned, it is fundamentally blank. It does not try to create any sort of layout for you, like column-based layouts or grid-based layouts or anything like that. It simply gives you a double container system, an outer container, an inner container, and default alignment and default padding. Number 4 is header and footer templates. Does the builder give you the ability to assign headers to different pages globally, footers to different pages globally? Can you mix and match the headers? I don't like how Oxygen does templates, honestly. It asks you to combine headers and footers, and then you put an inner content in between them. And you can still assign headers and footers to different pages, but it's just not the workflow that I would choose if I was creating my own builder. You have Divi, which does allow you to do headers and footers globally. And they do it right, in my opinion, where you can create a global header, assign it different places, create different global headers. Then you can have global footers, which are separate. And then your page content's going to go in between in any case. But it's separated out. Headers and footers are not tied together like they are in Oxygen as much. Bricks, same thing, gives you access to headers and footers independently from each other. Very, very important. But even the way Oxygen does it is workable. So the real question here is, and I think almost all builders are getting to this stage where they give you header and footer templates, but I still wanted to note that it is a mandatory feature. Number 5 is custom HTML tags. You should be able to change the tag of an HTML element. For example, if I had a div to a page, but I want it to be a section, I should be able to change the tag from div to section. I should be able to add a div in a grid and change that div from a div to an article, for example. So I should be able to make it have the article HTML tag. I should be able to add a div and change it to an unordered list, a UL. And then I should be able to put divs inside of that and change them to LI so that they're list items, child items of that unordered list. These are all things that Oxygen allows you to do. They're all things that Bricks allows you to do because these are tools that are suitable for professionals. Amateurs don't even know this is a limitation. Most amateurs don't know anything about semantic HTML. And this is an example of where toxicity will creep into these discussions, and you'll have argumentation that is illegitimate argumentation in the sense that amateurs don't know what they're talking about, but they won't hesitate to voice their opinion in these groups. They'll come into Oxygen and insist that classes aren't that important. They'll insist that having a div is not that important. They'll insist that changing the HTML tags of an element is not that important. Why are you guys worried about that? You're already seeing this in the Bricks group. There are a lot of amateurs in the Bricks Builder group. Thankfully, they haven't gone off the deep end with it, and they're still providing and still listening to professionals, still providing tools for professionals and listening to the input from professionals and doing things the right way. Bricks is a div first, class first builder. That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But there's still a lot of amateurs in the Bricks group. I'm not insulting the Bricks group. I'm not insulting anybody in particular in the Bricks group. I'm just saying that this is the fact of the matter. There's a lot of amateurs in the Bricks group who are going to say, classes aren't that important. We need to be able to hide the classes box. I don't even want to see it. Right? That's an amateur saying that. That's not a professional saying that. We're trying to bring some of the professionalism of Oxygen to Bricks because we want to see that stuff because it's very important, and amateurs push back against that, and they say, no, we don't need those things. We don't want this to be like Oxygen. When they say that, it's an illegitimate statement because they're basically saying, we don't want it to be suitable for professionals. But really, it's like, why? Like, we're in the web, we're trying to build websites. Like, you want to build the website the right way, whether you're an amateur or professional. At least that's my opinion. That should be the case, right? I'm not just some rando trying to slap together the quickest website I possibly can. Shit, if that's you, go use Wix, go use Squarespace, go use one of these other, there's plenty of illegitimate amateur builders out there that you can choose from. Bricks has the ability to be a tool for professionals, and thus we should make it so, because the other tool that we had for professionals has tripped and fell on its own face and is in the process of picking up their teeth. So it would be good to have another option. And I would love to see Bricks be that second option. We have Zion. Zion is another potential option here where you're going to see a lot of these boxes are checked that I'm going over. But Zion is not a div first, class first builder. It does not have classes front and center, and it doesn't have divs front and center. That's a major red flag for me. Big hurdle. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be the case. Zion is still early in the early stages. They may take the feedback. They may understand that, hey, building a class first, div first builder is the way to go because that's the fundamentals of web design and development. I go back to this. It's not even an argument, in my opinion. Like, how are you going to say we should skip the fundamentals? Skip the most important things. And suddenly we'll have a better builder? That doesn't make any sense to me. 7 is code block. Can I add a code block to the page? Can I add PHP to that? Can I add JavaScript to that? Even if I'm not a PHP developer, there's going to be points at which you need custom PHP code executed on a given page. Even if you're not a JavaScript developer, there's going to be points when you're working with clients, if you're a professional in any sense of the word, there's going to be points where you need to be able to execute JavaScript on a given page or throughout the website. Does the builder allow you to do that? Yes or no? If it doesn't, it's an amateur builder and it's not legitimate for professionals. Period. End of story. Number 8 is a repeater or a query loop. This is absolutely another fundamental. WordPress is a content management system. It is you'll hear the term CMS, right? It stands for Content Management System. So we're organizing content in the back end using things like custom post types and custom fields and taxonomies. So we're categorizing things. You can watch my video on when you're building a website for a business, having services be a custom post type, having reviews be a custom post type, having service areas be a custom post type, having locations be a custom post type, having the portfolio be a custom post type. These are ways we use the CMS to our advantage. We then use taxonomies to add additional categorization and filtering options to those pieces of data. When we do such things as professionals, and amateurs, by the way, maybe not, they don't know what a custom post type is. They don't know what custom fields are. They don't know how to do these things. They're going to end up building a much less scalable website. Whereas a professional can now use query loops and repeaters, they're basically the same thing, just depending on the builder you're using, to query that information onto specific pages in a specific way. And thus, if you have a services page and your services are all queried, so you've designed cards for each service, right? And you've used classes to style those cards, you now have global control over the entire, the website is so much more scalable. And perhaps you even have a template created for a service page. You have a service page, single post template. Going and adding a new service when the client says, hey, we have another service we want to add, is as easy as going to the services custom post type, clicking add new, filling out the custom fields, filling out all the media perhaps, doing the SEO optimization, and then hitting publish. And that service shows up in a card format on the services page automatically. People click on it. The service page looks great automatically because it's inheriting the service page template. And it's automatically queryable, filterable. It can show up in many different places on the website automatically. It's fantastic. That is a dynamic, scalable website. Somebody that doesn't use query loops or repeaters because either their builder doesn't offer it, Divi, Elementor, maybe Elementor is adding this, I don't know, Beaver Builder, okay? It's a huge problem and a huge limitation. And they think, oh, well, yeah, I sped up the design and development of the website because I didn't have to fiddle with that repeater thing. I didn't have to learn the repeater. I didn't have to make custom fields and custom post types. But now you have a website that is very difficult to maintain, very difficult to scale, and is not dynamic. So you're in a worse position. It's always the case of like, if we can just do a little bit more work up front, which, you know, again, I argue it's not even more work. What's more work is doing it wrong and then being involved in a website where everything is done wrong. You want to talk about a lot of work? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. This is one leg of the race in a 10-leg race, right? So if leg 1 takes me longer, but I've set myself up to make leg 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 take a quarter of the time, where the person who didn't do the right leg work in leg 1 is having to now do the same amount of work in 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. It's infinitely, as this goes on and on and on, slower to do it the wrong way, okay? So that's why we follow best practices. That's why we try to do stuff as organized and dynamic and scalable as possible from the beginning. If your builder does not have a repeater or a query loop, it is not a professional builder. It's an amateur builder. It's not a legitimate builder in my estimation. Number 9, dynamic data. Again, this is very important. You're talking about templates, custom templating. You're talking about custom post types and custom fields. We have to be able to pull information from our CMS. This is why we have a CMS, guys. This is why we have a CMS. This is fundamental to a content management system. Just like I said, a div is fundamental to HTML. Classes are fundamental to CSS. Custom post types, custom fields, templating. This is fundamental to a content management system. So we've got people building websites that are just skipping the features of a CMS, skipping the features, the core features of HTML, skipping the core features of CSS, and trying to tell us as professionals that this is a better method. They're doing it the right way. They're doing it a better way. They're doing it an easier way, right? None of that is true. It's simply not true. And this is not even arguable. Again, I'm going to say this over and over again. Not even an argument in my estimation. It's not. It's amateurs telling professionals what to do. It is not surprising that breeds toxicity and strong disagreement in these groups. Number 10, conditional logic. Can I hide or display elements of the website based on certain conditions? Can I hide phone numbers based on time of day of the week? Can I show or hide content based on whether custom fields have a specific value or not? This is all very important to building a scalable dynamic website. Number 11, clean code output, no divception. Divi, Elementor, Beaver Builder. You add one element to a page, a button, a heading, even something super, super simple, and it adds 5 divs. It's wrapping stuff and other stuff. It's got tons of classes and IDs and all this stuff going on. In a lot of cases, it's got pre-made styling that is trying to help you with shortcuts. And if you really know what you're doing and you're trying to get to where you want to go, all of those things are just hurdles to getting to where you want to go. And when it comes to clean code output, the other side of the story that we have to look at is stuff like Core Web Vitals. We talk about toxicity in these groups. I was in a discussion with somebody who uses Beaver Builder. They were telling me that Beaver Builder is a tool for professionals and that they sell websites all day long to clients and they build these websites in Beaver Builder and that it's been a rock for them and yada, 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 yada. This is an amateur who is selling websites to people, okay? Remember, we talked about a professional, someone who sells websites, but really there's an amateur in disguise. It's an amateur who's selling websites to people. But fundamentally and philosophically, they're an amateur. And in their knowledge base, they're an amateur. And he's telling me that Beaver Builder is just fantastic. And I said, tongue in cheek, poking, as I do. Okay, anybody that knows me on Facebook knows, like, hey, when I see a post like this, I'm going to speak up, right? I'm going to poke. I'm going to poke a little bit, and I'm going to get a discussion going, right? Because I think these things are important, but it also is entertaining, and it also does help other people. They come and they read the arguments against. Like, I don't want just people running their mouth, basically, who don't know what they're talking about, because other people get the wrong impression, and other people get led astray. If you convince somebody to use Beaver Builder, you have ruined their life, in my estimation, right? And so if I have the opportunity to step in and save somebody from that outcome, I'm absolutely going to do that. And I'm going to have fun while I do it. Okay. So this guy is telling me all about how Beaver Builder is great for professionals. So he says, I can't see how other people would use another tool or something like that. I don't remember what the exact thing was. He said something about, I can't see something. And I was like, I'm surprised you can see anything through all those divs. And that was the only comment that I wrote. And then he comes back and he was like, because these extra divs don't matter. So I go to his website, I pull it up, I go find, he's got a portfolio of client sites. I pull up each and every client site on Core Web Vitals, on Google PageSpeed Insights. Every single website is failing Core Web Vitals. Every single website is flagged for an excessive DOM size, DOM, right? So what that means is there's too many elements on the page. Now you look at the page and it looks like any normal website. How could this possibly have an excessive DOM size compared to another website that looks exactly the same? And it's because of Beaver Builder. It's because of Elementor. It's because of Divi. You add one element to your page, you're actually adding 5 elements to the page because of all the divs that are wrapping that element for basically no reason. And we know it's for no reason because Oxygen does it without doing this. Bricks is able to add elements without doing this divception nonsense. It's clean code versus not clean code. So you have a guy telling people that Beaver Builder's a professional tool and that he's had no problems with it and it's a rock and yada, yada. And then he explicitly told me that excessive DOM elements is not a problem, even though all his websites are failing Core Web Vitals and are being flagged for an excessive DOM size, okay? So this is just people that don't know what they're talking about, telling other people what they should and shouldn't be doing. And I have a problem with that. Shouldn't I don't you agree that I should have a problem with that? That any professional should have a problem with that? And so you'll get people saying things like, it doesn't matter what builder you use, just use the builder you're most comfortable with. That is objectively false. It's objectively false. This is not a use whatever camera that you're comfortable with. This is not a Canon versus Nikon situation, okay? We're going to get to a point where Oxygen versus bricks is Canon versus Nikon. That's the point that we're going to get to. And at that point, fine. Tell people it's user preference. But don't tell them it's user preference between Beaver Builder and Oxygen. That's just, excuse me, that's just dumb. That's just dumbass shit, okay? That is not, there's no objective reality there, okay? One is an amateur tool that does not give you professional access to things, and another is a tool that gives access to professionals, okay? So this is just not even an argument or a discussion. Next thing is, and I'm not going through these very fast, am I? Hopefully you're at least being entertained, or you're skipping around, I don't know, or you just, you like me enough to just sit here and watch the whole thing. Okay, next is, we did clean code output, Flexbox layout. So any professional builder should give Flexbox tools. Now, there's actually a lot of different ways to implement Flexbox. And you're going to see that Oxygen does Flexbox differently from bricks. I also want you to open up an app called Figma. Figma is a design tool. And Figma is geared towards professionals. And Figma uses two things that I want to point out. Because this goes to show that there are a lot of ways to execute on this where you can still follow best practices, but the builder still makes it easy. The reason I'm referencing Figma is because I don't think Oxygen makes Flexbox layout easy. So if they were trying to appeal to amateurs, and again, this is amateurs trying to become professionals, they wouldn't say, well, let's remove the Flexbox layouts because they're too complicated for amateurs. They should say, let's just find a way to make Flexbox easier. So you're still encouraging amateurs to use Flexbox because that's what they should be doing, but you're making it easy on them. That's totally legitimate, okay? It's not legitimate for Breakdance to be like, well, we're not going to give Flexbox tools. Now, I think even Breakdance does Flexbox tools because they recognize that some of this stuff you just can't remove. But Elementor, I think Elementor only recently gave Flexbox controls to its users. Divi still has basically no Flexbox tools, at least last time I used it. That's insane to me. Again, Flexbox fundamental to web design and development at this point. But the reason I bring up Figma is because you should go into Figma and you should add a frame to a page. And I want you to notice something. A frame in Figma is just a div. It's just a blank div. That's all it is. You add a frame and they have something called an auto layout. You can auto layout that frame. And the auto layout features in Figma are Flexbox. You just don't know it because it's all UI driven. They even have space between controls, just like Flexbox space between. But they use a visual grid system where you can click on little dots to align content inside of the auto layout. That is Flexbox, 100%. They just don't call it Flexbox, and they don't use any of the Flexbox terminology, but it is Flexbox, and it works pretty much everything that you would need to do in Flexbox for the most part from a base Flexbox standpoint you can do in Figma. And that is an example of how a builder could implement the exact same thing, and professionals would be able to use it just like professionals use Figma, and amateurs would find it very, very friendly, just the way amateurs find it friendly in Figma. Figma's done it very, very well. Number 13 is CSS Grid. If your builder does not give you access to CSS Grid or does not support CSS Grid, it is an amateur builder. It is not a professional builder. Professionals know they absolutely need Grid. It is very, very important and critical to web design and development. Lewis from SoFly, by the way, has tried to make the argument that Grid is not necessary, that you should only use Flexbox. Nobody needs Grid. What would you need Grid for? I think he even asked this in the Oxygen group, trying to get feedback from people, where a lot of people were like, hey, dude, Grid's kind of important, you know? Just like we told him classes were important, and he tried to tell us that classes are not important or fundamental to web design. Go figure. 14, an accessible menu builder. I talked about this a little bit in the beginning as one of my examples. You should be able to build an accessible menu in your builder of choice. Oxygen fails this, okay? It's 4.0 and Oxygen still fails this. And it's an area where you have a lot of amateurs clamoring for a mega menu. Amateurs want the shiny objects. Amateurs want the fancy things for the most part. By and large, professionals know that simple menus are the best way to go. Mega menus are not typically the best way to go. That's why you have professionals who are just like, give me a simple accessible menu with drop-downs, like single layer drop-downs. It may be a fly out option, but even probably not that. The flatter we can get the navigation, the better the experience is going to be for users typically. Okay, there are some cases where that may not be the case, but for the most part, a simple flat navigation style is the best way to go. And then we need to be able to transition that to a mobile device. All of that from desktop to mobile needs to be accessible. Again, Oxygen fails this test, but Oxygen has add-ons that do not fail the test, like Oxy Extras. But if you don't have a builder that gives you an accessible basic menu on desktop and mobile, in my opinion, it's not a professional builder, or it's lacking that professional feature at least. But that is a mandatory feature. All right, so the next one is reusable components. So reusable components are very, very important. It's basically you take a block that you've created, maybe we'll call it a CTA strip, a call to action strip, where you've got your call to action text. It's all designed a certain way, your call to action button, the link that the button is targeting, and so on. You get that exactly how you want to use it. Now, you want to use that on many different pages. You want to be able to use it inside of Gutenberg, for example. I don't know. You should be able to save that as a global component, and then wherever you use it, whenever that CTA needs to change, because guess what, guys? Offers change a lot for a lot of businesses. So you have an offer component basically, and you want to be able to change that from time to time as the offer changes. Can I change the heading and the heading changes everywhere I've used the block? Can I change the offer text changes everywhere I use the block? Can I change the button text changes everywhere I've used the block? Can I change the link that the button goes to and that changes everywhere I've used the block? Yes or no? If that's not available to you, you're not using a professional builder. Now, I will say that Oxygen, there's a dual layer to this global components thing. I'm not going to get into all the details now. Oxygen gives you enough to be usable, but it doesn't do it right in my opinion. Bricks doesn't do it right in my opinion yet. I haven't seen a builder that does it right in my opinion, but Bricks and Oxygen are serviceable in this regard. Next one is SRCSET Images. I have an entire training on SRCSET Images. Basically, these are responsive images. This is the ability to add an image to a website, but you're also telling the website, hey, these are the other available sizes, and the browser, because of SRCSET, is able to choose the size that it needs based on the size of the device dynamically. This is very important to user experience, website speed, lots of different things. Did I skip one? I feel like I skipped one. HTML attributes. I skipped HTML attributes, I believe. I did custom HTML tags, and then I never did HTML attributes. So we're going to throw in HTML attributes. I don't know what number this is going to be. I've probably skipped a number at some point. I'm not re-recording this entire thing. HTML attributes, very important. Can you add height and width attributes to images? That's one thing that popped into my mind, is the ability to add, those are HTML attributes, adding explicit width and height, which is important, if you don't know why that's important, to preventing cumulative layout shift, as an example, and passing core web vitals on CLS. Again, technical things that amateurs probably don't really know anything about. When it comes to accessibility, HTML attributes are extremely important. You have to be able to add ARIA labels, ARIA hidden, ARIA, all of these different ARIA features for accessibility come through the use of HTML attributes. As far as I know, Divi does not allow you to add HTML attributes. Elementor does not allow you to add HTML attributes unless they have specific pre-made HTML attributes for you in some cases. But that's not custom HTML attributes, open-ended, where you can add anything. Data attributes are very important. So if you can't add data attributes, it's not a professional builder. Those are a different kind of HTML attribute. So you see that these things, that amateurs don't even really know anything about, for the most part. And they're going to be like, why are you guys worried about this thing? We don't need this kind of discussion in the bricks group. Why? Why don't we need that kind of discussion? We're talking about fundamentals. So if you want to ever move from amateur to professional, or you're just an amateur that really wants and loves creating a great website, and you want to do things the right way, following best practices, you need to be thinking about these things. You need to choose a builder that gives you access to these things. Number 17 is unit selection. Unit selection means, can I choose rem? Can I choose VH, VW, CH? These are very important to be able to switch between in different scenarios, right? Can I use variables? Woo, boy, big one right there. Okay, it is not a professional builder. Again, the guy told me, hey, Beaver Builder is so professional. Open Beaver Builder. First check I did. Can I add variables for colors? Can I add variables for font size and spacing, padding, things like that? The answer is no, you can't. So it's not a professional builder. It's an amateur builder. I couldn't use Beaver Builder for a single day in my life because of the things that it lacks. I mean, just Beaver Builder right off the bat. Does it have a div? No. Does it have classes? Not really. Does it have a section element? Not really. Does it have header and footer templates? I believe so. Custom HTML tags? Don't think so. HTML attributes? Don't think so. Repeater query loop? Don't think so. It's just on and on and on, and yet this guy's telling me, oh, Beaver Builder is a rock for professionals. Get out of here, man. Get out of here. Nonsense. Okay. Let's go with, we did unit selection, so rem, VH, VW, CH, etc. 18 is a decent structure panel. This is where Gutenberg fails for me. Everybody's telling me Gutenberg is the next best thing since sliced bread. Decent structure panel means, can I drag and drop easily? Can I see the entire structure of the page that I'm building? Can I rename things in the structure panel? Can I do things from the structure panel like duplicate, delete, etc.? Can I do it with one click? Very, very, very important to have a really decent structure panel. Oxygen has a not decent structure panel. It's decent in every regard except for drag and drop. It is absolutely horrific for drag and drop. I don't care what they say. They did not fix it in 4.0. It's still horrific. Bricks, great structure panel. The drag and drop is flawless. The size of the structure panel, the readability of the structure panel, all absolutely fantastic. Number 19, shortcode execution. Can I execute shortcodes in the builder? Yes or no? That's very important because, like I said, if the builder, for example, doesn't give you access to an accessible basic menu, you can take something like Max Mega Menu, build your accessible menu. It'll give you a shortcode. You drop that shortcode in the builder. It executes the shortcode. You have an accessible menu. So even if the builder didn't give you access to it, you're able to still get it when using that builder. A forms thing would be another one. So I use WS Form, right? I think it's the best forms builder for WordPress. It's going to give you a shortcode. You take that shortcode, you put it in a builder, it's going to show your form where you put the shortcode. Unless, of course, your builder doesn't support shortcode execution. That would be a major problem. That would be an amateur builder. Number 20, final one, customizable breakpoints. Can you change the breakpoints that you want to change? And with automatic CSS, if you're using that, you can customize the breakpoints. The builder should be able to customize the breakpoints so that you can match. Very, very, very important. Okay, so those are my 20 mandatory things. I know this has been a long video. We're an hour into this thing. I told you, grab some coffee, grab some wine, whatever. This is a super important discussion though. And it's going to answer the question of how do I find the next builder for me if I don't want to use Oxygen? If I don't want to use bricks, maybe for whatever reason you don't like bricks and you want to evaluate some other builders. I know some people are looking at some Gutenberg builders like Quickly as an example. Well, how do you grade it? For a professional, a true professional to ever use a builder, it would need these 20 things. So that's it. If you have any questions, drop them below. If you were offended by my amateur versus professional talk, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm not attempting to offend you, but I am attempting to tell it like it is. I'm not sugarcoating things. I truly believe that there are amateur builders and there are professional builders. And if you consider yourself to be a professional in any sense of the word, which includes just a philosophical professional, then you should not use the amateur builders. They are not suitable to be used. Period. End of story. Okay. You're never going to see me build a website in Divi. You're never going to see me build a website in Elementor. You're never going to see me build a website in Beaver Builder. It's not going to happen. And so people can ask for tutorials using these, but it's just never going to happen. You will see me build websites in bricks. In fact, the next client site I'm doing is in bricks, and I am recording an entire series from start to finish of this website in bricks inside of my inner circle. So you're going to see plenty of stuff in bricks. You may end up seeing something in Quickly if I decide that Quickly, does all these 20 things. But that is it for me and this discussion. I am out. Peace.